From the global megacities of Buenos Aires and Mexico City to the revitalizing neighborhoods of Brooklyn and Detroit, superstar entrepreneurs are scaling their businesses, fast-tracking the rebirth of our communities, and changing the economic landscape. I love this panel. It's called Superstar Entrepreneurs, and I'd love to welcome Joanna Harries from Global Endeavor and Antonio Lück from Endeavor Detroit to the stage to join Richard in conversation.
Hey, Joanna. Get you my hand up.
But we aren't the superstar entrepreneurs.
But you make them.
But we help make them, yeah.
Thank you, Rana. We're really lucky to have these two people here with us, and you're really lucky to have them here. I've known Joanna Harries now for 3 or 4 years. I met her in the office of Endeavor in New York several years ago, right when I started teaching on a joint appointment at NYU. And well, she immediately impressed me as someone who understands this field of not just building superstar entrepreneurs, which she does, but building entrepreneurial communities and ecosystems. And even though she's doing it here in the States, she spent most of her life doing it in places with far less advantages than we have here in the States. In the far-reaching parts of Latin America, in parts of the Middle East, and parts of Eastern Europe, and that's what Endeavor does. It really uses entrepreneurship as a capacity to build great communities, great nations, and great cities. So Joanna launches these projects all over the world. She launched Endeavor's project in Miami. She's now launched a project in Detroit. And, well, now you have an office in Detroit. And Antonio Lück is the new managing director for the Endeavor Detroit office and has done a whole bunch of other really important work in this city and in this state. So Joanna, let's start. And we're going to talk really about not so much how you make successful companies, but how you build that ecosystem. How do you build an environment which not only breeds 1 or 2 successes, but breeds lots of companies? So, Joanna, you know more about this than probably anyone else in the world. And I guess it's a 2-track question. The one track is, what are the really important components of a successful, creative, innovative entrepreneurial infrastructure ecosystem? But the bigger question, and you can take these as 2 or we can just continue, is when you did your due diligence, because I know what you do. When you did, because they did due diligence on this town. When you did your due diligence on Detroit, what did you find that were things that led you to believe that there was this ecosystem or could be this ecosystem? And I think most importantly, what might you have found that you saw as an obstacle or as an impediment or as something that might have in the past or perhaps in the present kept this entrepreneurial or muted this entrepreneurial DNA from blossoming as fully as it could?
Okay, yeah. Happy to talk about that. And maybe I'll just back up for 1 second, just give Endeavor, I like to think Endeavor's unique in the number of important sport organizations that are backing entrepreneurs and that we're laser focused on the scale-up entrepreneur. And really, these are the entrepreneurs that have moved beyond the startup phase, that have generated some traction, and they are poised for growth. And regardless of sector, what we've learned at Endeavor is that these entrepreneurs need a very different level of support at that phase while they're growing and scaling than they would in sort of that earlier startup phase. And so we've spent all of our time trying to work with these entrepreneurs because we know they have a disproportionate impact on the communities, on the cities that they're from. And they're often there, and they're already there, and it's just kind of finding them and helping them to grow and scale. I'll save a bit for Antonio because he was a part of all that due diligence as well early on, and we did a number. We met with a lot of different organizations. I'll just say overall, for Detroit, for Southeast Michigan, so we were looking at it more as a region. We worked really closely with the New Economy Initiative. What we found was there was a lot of stuff going into kind of the incubators and the accelerator models, seed funding organizations. It was all very, very important, but we saw that then there wasn't a lot of traction for that second stage company or that scale-up entrepreneur. And so we wanted to kind of get on the ground and see if we could help fill some of that gap to get the companies that had really come out of the startup, this really powerful startup ecosystem over the last 5-6 years, and we've seen it. I mean, they've doubled. The stats from the report, and we're happy to share it after, are really staggering in terms of, I think, what's happened in terms of drawing people back downtown and drawing more startups. But how do you then get those companies to scale?
So
and
what
stay?
what are the key components, really fast for the audience, of a robust startup or entrepreneurial ecosystem anywhere in the world? What were the things you would look for that say, oh my God, this place has it, or in the ideal configuration?
Yeah, and for Endeavor, I mean, we're looking for, I mean, it may be a little different than other support organizations. We are looking for that sort of beginning, that there were enough support organizations that had created, the startups and coming out of that, and then enough other funding organizations. We're looking across the whole value chain, so from a startup all the way through to scale, and then this component of give back. And a good indication for us that there was a need and opportunity intersection was when we had that a couple kind of iconic scale-up success stories that you might know about, but they weren't necessarily engaged in the community. And Endeavor's role is really trying to not only find the new ones, but find the ones that are existing and help kind of draw them back in and have it be their role and their mission to also invest and reinvest in what's happening.
So big assets would be a nascent, emerging entrepreneurial community. Some in this community, big successes, nameplate companies that have been successes. Great universities like Wayne State, this is Center for Creative Studies, Michigan State, Michigan out in the environment that are attracting talent, a burgeoning group of people wanting to come here. There are all sorts of the things. So when you looked, Antonio, when you did this due diligence, what did you find? Which of those things were big net positives? And be honest, what were the things that you saw that might have been holding back? Because frankly, I'm going to be honest, I would expect more. Looking at the kind of research infrastructure, the university infrastructure, the talent base, I might expect more than what's here. But what did you find?
Yeah, I think the state and as a whole has been pretty successful to build an entrepreneurial community, a very early stage startup community. We have incubators, accelerators, universities, translational research support, university project support. But then we hit what we would call on the capital continuum kind of the Series A, and that's kind of where most of the support starts or stops. We do have funding organizations that are involved with growth capital and then mezzanine and so forth. But from an infrastructure support standpoint, that's one of the big gaps that we saw with Endeavor in the States, and where Endeavor could literally come and plug into a pipeline that is refreshed and being built, and hopefully will continue to be supported through the state.
Joanna, you mentioned this thing about, and I know your research, these high-impact entrepreneurs. And I know you've done studies of the Silicon Valley and the Bay Area. And what you found is these high-impact, successful entrepreneurs really matter. And in a variety of ways. Tell us something about what these high-impact, big successful entrepreneurs are, and in general, and then if you can see any, maybe you can, maybe you can't, that are here in this region.
Right, and yeah, we definitely do. And they don't start big, right? So this high impact entrepreneur with high impact potential, Endeavor considers high impact entrepreneurs those that go through 2 phases. The first phase is you achieve success. And it sounds super easy and probably not super easy. And it really is about scaling from, so you can start small, move medium, move large, but it's that scale effect that creates thousands of jobs. You have some kind of liquidity event that's big for the market. You create wealth, for yourself. And instead of buying the Ferrari and driving off into the sunset, we're really focused on high impact entrepreneurs for the second stage, that second phase of growth, or what we call phase 2, which is where they reinvest their success. So they're not driving off into the sunset. They're reinvesting in their communities. They're reinvesting their credibility, the knowledge that they've gained growing their company, directly investing. They start the venture capital funds themselves. They become the mentors, and they become the inspiration, and they draw other entrepreneurs and talent into the market. Endeavor's done a lot of research on the most vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystems in the world. I think the classic case is Silicon Valley. And really, you can draw almost all of these vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystems back to a handful of really iconic success stories. Sometimes it takes a while, but it's really interesting to look. Classic example with Silicon Valley and overused, but 70% of the publicly traded firms today can be drawn back to those first Fairchild semiconductor engineers. It's like $2 trillion, and It's just that really, I think we focus a lot on a lot of different aspects of entrepreneurship and economic development, but obviously I do what I do because I believe 100% that it is these high impact entrepreneurs.
You said something kind of revolutionary there. Like my economics 101 class taught me that entrepreneurs they become entrepreneurs because they want to make money, because they want that Ferrari, because they want that Lambo, because they want to be like a big deal. What you're saying is something different. Maybe it's a generational change, maybe it's a change in our society. Not all, there are still probably a lot of entrepreneurs who want just that, but there's some subset of these entrepreneurs who want to build their business to make other entrepreneurs successful, and maybe a subproportion of them that want to make society better. How do you find those people?
Yeah, it's like you see it in their eyes. It's almost a mission to grow their company. I'm not saying they don't buy a Ferrari. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, honestly, but just that.
As long as it's made in Detroit.
Right, exactly, good point. But just that, that is really their mission. And on average, our entrepreneurs are 40, so I'm not sure it's a generational thing. I think just this mission that, it is my job and my role. And we select entrepreneurs for that reason. We go through, 5 different phases. We could talk at length over coffee break about how we find these entrepreneurs. And then we really keep our culture strong. We have 1,000 entrepreneurs around the world that we support at Endeavor. It might sound like a lot. It's not when you consider we've been around 20 years, and I think we've screened somewhere like 35,000 of them to get to ones where we feel like, and it's not to be elitist at all, it's just to say that we really feel like these entrepreneurs are going to change their communities and the world, and we want to double down and focus on them.
How far are you along, Antonio, in here? How far have you gotten here? And are you already beginning to look for companies here? And at what stage? And if you are, or if it's early, what kind of companies and what kind of entrepreneurial things have you seen bubbling up in this environment that are the kinds of companies you will be or might be working with?
Thank you for teeing it up. Well, we're looking generally for companies that we call scale-up companies or stage 2 companies. Companies with generally 2 to 5 million in revenue. If they're a more traditional industry, we'll go up to 20. We're working with a company that's projecting 30 million this year. So I'll get back to the definition in a second, but I'll tell you a little bit about where we are with the office. So Joanna had an instrumental part in putting the office together, as you well know. Our board of directors is constituted. We might add a few more folks down the line, and we're really happy with the folks that we have on our board. Super successful people and very committed not only to the success of Detroit, but also Michigan. Our team is put together. We are in a co-working space downtown right now, and we've been working very, very hard since our launch in February. We have probably researched 50 to 60 companies. We have sat down with probably 20 companies closely. We've selected locally 3 companies to go through the international selection panel. Can
you tell us about them? Even if it's general?
Well, we can talk general
about them, because I think folks would be...
to give you an idea.
The kinds of companies, the kinds of things they're doing.
Exactly. We have a company that we're really excited about in the food and beverage industry. We have, they're a super nice brand, great entrepreneurs, already working with the community, fantastic mentors. We have another company that we really believe she's going to be a fantastic role model for the entire area, not only from being in the advanced manufacturing industry as a woman, but an engineer. Very successful with the strategy she has adopted, and I think she'll be fantastic. But all of these still need to be selected down the line through the international selection panel. So that's why I don't want to...
And tell us about, because folks here, what is that internet? What does it mean for a company from Detroit? And I like the food and beverage. I think there's enormous space for reinvention and disruption. What does it mean for folks to send companies to this international selection panel?
So I won't go into details of the entire process, but there are 3 major phases. One is finding the company, the second one is selecting the company locally, and the third one is selecting the company on an international selection panel. Locally, it's basically our boards and our mentors, an international selection panel, global board members and global mentors, and we have about 3,000 of those within our network right now. And it's a great honor to just be able to work with such an organization and be able to find these companies and take them through the process. And we're pretty confident in the ones that we have, but we also hear that the international selection panels can be very challenging. And then the third company that we're working right now that we've selected locally as well is more in the technology industry and in the agriculture industry, which we're really excited to get. And we have a few in the software right now that we're talking to that would be really interesting. We're trying to find a ways. We're still, it's still very early, but I think the next step right now is trying to define really what will be our portfolio is going to look from companies here. But I come a little bit more from the technology world, so I have to broaden my reach more extensively through the other industries right now. But if anybody knows about companies that are anywhere in Michigan, 2 to 5 million in revenue, 30% year-over-year growth, fantastic entrepreneurs that are already giving back or plan to give back to the community, are mentors themselves, and have a deep community involvement, would love to talk to them. And we're also looking for mentors, really high caliber folks that have done it before, or that are very well connected that can help these entrepreneurs be successful.
When I wrote Rise of the Creative Class and interviewed people all over the country and all over the world, successful people in technology and startup-based industries, the thing that they said they were most missing in their life was their ability to mentor people. This was like a giant hole in these people's lives. So I think for you guys, the ability, if you do this, to give back really matters. I want to take one little sidecar here because we're in Detroit and it has such a large Arabic population. And as you know, my wife's Jordanian and her family is Jordanian. And one of the things that struck me when I met you, we can make this quick, but I want you to talk about it, is you were working in the Middle East for a long time. And when I met you in your office, there was a giant poster about a Middle East ecosystem that, in your minds, was very successful, and it was Amman, Jordan. Just tell us a little bit, especially since there's such a large Arabic community. It's not a place I would have suspected. I would have suspected other places. What did you find in a place like Amman, Jordan, that struck you as building this incredible ecosystem? And is there anything, because the conditions here are it's much more developed, better universities, anything we can learn in Detroit, especially a place that has such a large Arabic community?
Yeah. And it really was surprising, I think, to us too, as we started to build the maps in our Middle Eastern markets in particular, just how much traction they were gaining. And Amman, Jordan is one of our oldest offices, so you can really see, Endeavor does these sort of influence mappings where the size of the bubbles that we use is not like the size of the company, but the size of influence. How many people have they mentored? How many of their employees have gone on to start companies of their own? How many have made investments in other entrepreneurs? And what you saw in Amman over really not that long period of time, like a 10, 12-year period, was in particular with the tech ecosystem, which we looked at. I think it's important to say that Endeavor's sector agnostic, and a lot of the great companies we're finding in Detroit aren't tech, and I think that's an important part of the puzzle. But in Amman, we looked at the tech ecosystem, and you could really see over time this incredible growth and really a self-fueling itself. But it started, if I had to say kind of the one thing I always go back to for Amman, because I know some of these people well, with this incredible board of directors that were the iconic entrepreneurs. So one thing that Amman had going for it that maybe some of our other markets struggled with a bit more, especially in the Middle East, was certainly Saudi Arabia struggled with this, but having those self-made entrepreneurs that would stand up, like a Fadi Gandour who built Aramex in the Middle East, which is the massive UPS logistics company, and really is investing himself. He was that iconic high-impact entrepreneur that had already said, I will seed this, I will found this, so he started it.
And I think Detroit really stands out on this dimension. Like when I look at Detroit, what's different between Detroit and Pittsburgh, or even Detroit and Boston. In Pittsburgh, what made Pittsburgh whole was old money. Like Carnegie's and Mellon's and Heinz's and old foundation money that provided enough funding to the universities and the communities and the neighborhoods to stop them from collapsing. But there wasn't a lot of new money. In fact, one of the things we had to do at the universities was try to create new money by doing tech spinoffs. One of the things that strikes me about Detroit is that there's a lot of old money, a lot of very big and wealthy philanthropies, but there are quite a few successful people of my generation, particularly reinvesting here. And not just one, there are several. So this idea of a board of directors, in your case, or a group of people who were more recently, not 7 generations ago, successful, makes sense. What does that board of directors, that locally embedded group of people, what role do they play in helping to catalyze the birth of these kind of new, fast-growing, fledgling startups?
Yeah, do you want to take?
Yeah, a significant role. The more engaged that we can get the board members to be, the more successful we're going to be. If we're able to tap in to them as not only mentor resources to help the companies, because many of our board members here have built companies in the past, and significant companies for that matter, but also tap into the networks, tap into the people that they know, get their contacts to help other folks. And the people that we also have on our board, a lot of them are from nonprofit organizations as well, or foundations, so they have a different kind of perspective that is also very helpful when you're looking for especially funding or looking for other support organizations for the entrepreneurs. We're looking to work with universities and maybe at some point in time bring student programs within Endeavor to work with our company. So what we're doing is fighting for every resource that we can to help our entrepreneurs be successful, and our board of directors can be a significant help in doing that.
You know, one of the things I read your studies, and these guys did a remarkable study recently on what really makes these great places for entrepreneurs, what really shapes them. And in that study, when I read it, I saw two factors, Joanna. One was talent, that really the emphasis was on talent, not just home-growing talent, but attracting talent. And it seems to be, at least what I can see, I seem to see people headed here. It used to be there was a brain drain, right? And talented and successful people would leave, but I see an opposite reaction now, a brain gain. And actually, I don't like that. I think a brain circulation is the best when you think about the circulation of people in and out is the best way to think about it. But the other thing that report said is place really matters. That the old world of the nondescript, one of my friends calls it a nerdistan. This idea, you know, the nerdy suburban office park that's nondescript, that's losing favor, and that what's happening is that this new group of tech companies, whether it's Lower Manhattan, whether it's the urban parts of San Francisco, we'll talk about later, they want to be in like real cities. Yeah. How does that, both in general, but with regard to Detroit, how do you see this intersection of both a place that is attracting talent or gaining talent and a community, a place, a set of physical assets, buildings? You know, Jane Jacobs, one of my mentors, always said, new ideas require old buildings. How do you see that being playing itself out here?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that study really surprised us. We did this, you know, how do entrepreneurs choose a city? And we expected any number of responses. We talked to 150 of the Inc. 500 list, and by and large, like by a long shot, it was quality of place. And that we were surprised, quality of place. And then we did a Southeast Michigan assessment before we launched Endeavor in Detroit, and we found that 78% of these high growth companies, you know, growing over the last 3 years, upwards of 20% a year, 78% of them said they were here because of family ties or because they had lived here long enough that they had like real connections. And that's a large number. So a lot of the entrepreneurs Antonio was talking about were kind of coming out of the woodwork. They're people that are already here. So I think it's kind of an important distinction that you know, it's not necessarily that they're coming out of the incubator or the accelerator that's sort of set up. They're really kind of already here and finding them and figuring out ways to plug them in with each other, tech, non-tech, in order to kind of, I think it only will take a couple of those kind of breakout successes to kind of draw in even more people and draw on the talent, and it really does become kind of a hub for more high impact entrepreneurs.
One of the things I hear you guys saying is, you're being very nice about this. But there's a lot of quick fixes that communities, not this one, all communities come up with. Oh, if we only had an incubator. Let's have a space and call it an incubator. Oh, if we only had an accelerator. Well, it would be great. Only if we had a tech transfer office. Only if we had our local, we don't have enough venture capital. We'll have a venture capital little fund and it'll work. What you seem to be saying is all of these amount to Band-Aids or less, and there's some other longer running, right? Longer running set of processes about community quality, community attachment, the great place, not just universities, great places, because so much talent in our society, it doesn't come from universities. Like the people I know who built the best startups didn't go to college, you know. They built one of my friends was a hairdresser and he built a company called MAC Cosmetics. Another guy liked garments and he built the Club Monaco. They're entrepreneurs in their being. So I don't mean to say it's professors with spin-offs, but you seem to be saying there's something more than these tick-off boxes that creates this entrepreneurial fervor. Tell us more about that and what seems to be aspects of that here. Antonio.
Can I just ask one question? How many folks in the audience, if you can just raise your hand, are from Detroit or the region or Southeast Michigan?
Born and raised.
Okay, awesome. I'd say about half, maybe a little bit less than half. Okay. So a lot of you know about the assets that we have here from a physical standpoint and where Detroit was about 10 years ago and what's going on with Detroit in the last 3 years, which are significant changes. And I think we hit or are very close to hitting kind of the tipping point in kind of the brain drain or brain circulation into the city, right? And all universities have been very, very involved in making this happen. And I really believe that that is something significant for the city, where the change is happening. But we have significant assets here, really, really interesting assets that inaccessible that we wouldn't have in other places. Like you have Belle Isle, you have the yacht club, you have the river right downtown that is going to go through even greater transformation. City living is becoming more and more common. I know people that live in Detroit right now and have no cars.
Yep.
How many of those would you have talked about 10 years ago? Obviously, Uber has a great influence, but technology in itself is happening. More entrepreneurs are coming. How many companies has anybody heard of coming back to Detroit from the suburbs in the last 6 months? If anybody can raise their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So it's happening. It's happening more frequently. We know about 2 companies that we're talking to are actually moving back to the city. So it is happening, and we really believe in that. And we believe that Michigan as a state is a great, great state as a place of living.
Because the state has made those investments in great universities, great research institutions, great design. I mean, I can't even name them all. We'd be here all day. And you look at other states that haven't made those investments.
Getting the Great Lakes here was a good.
Yeah, that was a big, important one. And cleaning them up was on. I actually worked with the governors on that 2 decades ago. But I think what you're saying, and there's 2 inflection points, and I think we all know this. The one inflection point is that this place is growing and becoming robust. The other one that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes is that New York and San Francisco and Boston and Toronto, that's not New York or Boston or San Francisco, a attached single-family home, not in the urban core, in the entire metro, is over $1 million. In New York City and Manhattan, it's $2,000 a square foot. In San Francisco, we'll talk about this, a dramatic housing shortage. So one of the things is that means that for people who want to do something new, they have to look for another. Now whether it's Detroit, there are other places competing for that person. Matt Haglund's going to tell you about how Miami's competing for that person, and there's many others. But the idea is that there's 2 of these inflection points crossing. Detroit is on the upswing, just at the point, and that's why I call it a new urban crisis, where just when these places have recovered and come back, they're facing a new set of challenges about affordability. I just want to thank you guys, Joanna and Antonio. Thank you for your presence, and really thank you for bringing Endeavor here. In my view, and I think it's I saw what you guys have done many places around the world and also now in Miami. You add a critical component. So thank you for your presence on this conversations, but moreover, thank you for doing all of this in this great city. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Nicely done. Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you very much.